Well, today we have Mike Puckett joining us for this lecture interview, and Mike is the guru of all church planting ministry as far as college campuses. I'm just kidding. He is the BCM director of the High Country in Western North Carolina. So he does a lot with Appalachian State and a lot of other colleges in that area. And I believe you got started specifically on App State's campus. Is that correct? When you first started in the ministry?
Yeah, that's right, man. I go a little ways back and served as an intern coming out of college in my early seminary days, and then have been back leading as the director here for I guess I'm in my fourth year right now.
Very cool, very cool. Well, tell us a little bit about your ministry there and what you do there at BCM.
Yeah, sure, man. So we have been a fairly traditional BCM organization, Baptist Campus Ministry, for some time. And we've had some things that were a little different than maybe some of the actual traditional programs. With we didn't do like the lunch program and things like that, but focused on training students to act like missionaries on their campus, reaching people in pockets of lostness and darkness, spiritual darkness on campus. And that was a part of who we were for really a good deal of the last maybe 10 years. And that ebbed and flowed over some time. But in more recent history, the last couple of years, we've made a shift away from some of the more traditional campus ministry kind of model to focusing on much more simple, biblical, reproducible church planting work. And we've been learning from, rather than saying, hey, we want to be missionaries, be like missionaries, and yet still somehow kind of looking towards the more mega manifestations of church and ministry as our examples, started saying, well, what if we actually started learning from missionaries overseas in foreign contexts where they're the ultra minority? How do we learn from them and adapt the things that we're seeing God do to expand his kingdom through them there? What can we do in our setting here where we're now more like the visiting team than we are the home team? So as we've been going through that process, really been adapting a lot of really simple things that are reproducible quickly that students can take on from an early stage. So we're having fun kind of trailblazing through that here, figuring out what that looks like in our context.
Very cool. Well, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to feature you in our class this semester. We're kind of in the reproducing phase of this church plant. We're expanding ministry, whatever way that looks like. We're starting new churches. We're involved in multiplication, getting mobilizing the members of our church, whatever that looks like, in order to engage and multiply that effort into more churches and different things. And so I knew that you, as a leader and as the group that you direct, I've always heard of you guys, and I've spent some time with you, and always knew that you had a really big heart for equipping students to do the work of the ministry. So you were equipping students to be disciple makers themselves. And actually, right before we started recording, you were sharing, I think it was just today or yesterday or something, that students were leading just led another student to Christ, and they're being baptized tomorrow. I mean, all kind of really cool stuff happening. And so we wanted you in this class. I know that as we're talking about reproduction, I know that you guys have had a really successful go at it, so to speak, as far as mobilizing students. So I kind of want to hear kind of both sides. I want to hear, what are you guys doing as far as equipping these students for multiplying? Because these students are in a sense, and I know that a lot of typical Baptist campus ministries, they're just strictly on campus, and they don't consider themselves a church. They want to get students involved in other local churches. So maybe kind of share a little bit about how your students are relating that way to your group with other churches, or I know some other college campuses are actually planting college churches basically on the campus itself. So kind of explain a little bit what that looks like for you guys and how you're equipping students for being these disciple makers.
Yeah, sure, man. Our focus on working with students, reaching people who are lost, training existing believers over the years, when I look back, feels a little confusing to me because what I saw when I looked back, even into the years that I've been here, we would say, we're not a church, we're not a church, we're not a church. You need to go plug into a local church, and we'll walk with you here on campus as well. But we would say those things, and our programs and processes would just look like a college version of what they were doing in their local churches already. So it felt really kind of confusing to I think not just me and our team, but to our students as well. And we were fighting that identity battle of, well, what are we, and how should students see us? What should our function be? And we finally started making some hard choices and really feeling God pressing us when we were looking at the numbers of students around us who are far from God. We were seeing, we did a study recently that showed, just based on some kind of census and credit kinds of statistics, that only about 9% of the people that are within a mile of our campus would say that their faith is very important to them, and that doesn't say what their faith is, and it doesn't say what very important actually means. And so that 9% actually feels a little high based on what we experience on a daily basis here. But we realize there's some pretty radical lostness around us, even in our little mountain town here in North Carolina. And so we're saying, we need to start with the lost in mind, not with existing believers in mind. How are we going to go after lost people? We realize that Jesus says to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And so we started looking at, well, what does the kingdom do? How does the kingdom function? And we see that the kingdom outpost on earth is the church, right? We see that is where it is most fully known. And I just started feeling this real sense of leading, this conviction that Jesus shed his blood for his church, and we would be limiting our identity if we're not living into the identity of church. And the problem was, as we were leading some students to Christ recently, most of these new believers are not comfortable in a traditional setting. Even if it's contemporary in the way that we would describe it as insiders, now that they're just becoming insiders, they were outsiders for their entire lives, it is not comfortable for them. They don't fit. They don't understand it. So we are looking at our fields in front of us saying, whether it is older, traditional kind of church, or it is small, reproducible, little church in the harvest sort of a perspective, they're both Christ's bride, but there's more than one way to see it. The contents are what matter, not so much the container. And so what we've said is, how can we keep it as intentionally simple as possible so that everything we do is reproducible, even to the point where we have asked ourselves, is there anything that we do that a freshman cannot do? Should we get rid of that? Is there anything that can't be reproduced if we take our hands entirely off of it? And we've realized if we want to see the gospel go, our vision has been no place left. That's what we use as sort of the organizing vision, the mission that we're after, is to see no place left without a gospel presence. We want every single student in our field to have a chance to hear the gospel personally and respond individually to it. And for that to happen, we have got to raise up an army of believers who are driven by love and obedience to Jesus to share the gospel with everyone around them and train them to follow Jesus, share the gospel, and make disciples. And so we're not even really interested in building one church, growing one church. I want to see about 300 churches led by students across our campus, meeting in dorm rooms, coffee shops, library study rooms, out on the grass in the middle of campus. But we can't expect a student to feel confident to lead something that's not fairly simple. And if they can't lead it themselves, it's certainly not reproducible. So that's a key value for us is, can the thing that we're doing, can the training we're providing, can the tools that we're using not just be practiced by a student, but can it be reproduced by a student to another student? Can it be passed down generationally while they're here in a fairly rapid sort of response? And we've even said, well, if we can't get to no place left within a 4-year period, when students go from freshmen to graduating seniors, then we're not simple enough. We're not reproducing quickly enough. Our vision is drifting. Our focus is not tight enough. So those are some of the concepts in our head, some of the values that we carry that are kind of the measuring stick for what we're doing and how well it's going.
I think those are so key for established churches who are looking to multiply or grow, whatever their heart is, to make things just so simple that they can be reproducible. As far as for us, planning a church in Calgary, we're thinking on the front end. Okay, we want all of our systems, all of our structure, our leadership development, all that to be so simple that any person can walk in and say, "Oh, I can fit in this. Well, I can become the next move up the kind of leadership ladder. I can become this, or I can lead that small group, or I can do whatever." And we talked a little bit in this class about church planning approaches and models and different things. And the cool thing right now that we're seeing is that there are folks like yourself who are just kind of shattering the paradigms of thinking of what traditional church planting even is supposed to be. And even now the books are being written are saying, hey, here are some models that we don't understand because they're in this, they're in the seminaries writing the books or whatever. And then there's guys like you, like, oh yeah, we have 100 pastors who are all students who are leading their own dorm church kind of thing. Like, is that okay? Well, what do you mean? So I think it's really cool, and that's why now is really a really cool time in the history of the church. I think because we're realizing, especially here in a Western context, we've got to do things differently. And I think one of the great things is for what you guys are doing is that you kind of see that 4-year time frame as they're going to leave. Majority of students are not going to stick around. A 5-mile radius of the campus that they graduated from, they're going to be going out all over the world, and you're sending them out with a model that they can take anywhere they go. They can go anywhere and start a house church. They can go anywhere and start a Bible study because they did it in their dorm. And it's simple and reproducible. I think it's a very key lesson. I think that you guys have done really, really well. And we don't always have to worry about all the legal headaches of, is this a church or not? Do they have a name? Do they have a logo? All that kind of stuff. When it comes down to it, that's not the big picture that Jesus was going after in the Great Commission. And so I'm glad that you guys are really going after it. So let me we've heard a little bit about kind of what you guys look like, and you are very much a kind of a non-traditional Baptist collegiate ministry, because I was a part of one, kind of in a tertiary sense. My wife, when we were dating in college, she was at Wake Forest. She was part of the BCM there, and at that point it was really anemic, and she just stopped going. It was just, she's like, I don't need another 30-minute Bible study on a Tuesday night. That was really just it wasn't anything helpful for her, and she really wanted to be connected to a local church. And so I know a lot of BCMs that really struggled. I'm glad you guys have found a healthy way to struggle to handle that tension. But how are you seeing other churches right now, either in your area or elsewhere, who are being served or taken care of or even growing because of what you guys are doing there on campus? So how are you seeing other churches being helped?
Yeah, it's really interesting what God has done in us and around us, because it's not just been, we're seeing some early kind of first fruits. I think that a year and a half ago, we were struggling with how to transition away from the kind of attractional come be a part of the thing we're doing. And I think anemic is a good word to describe, if not where we were heading rapidly in our work here. And I could smell what was coming. It's like when you smell snow in the air, it's coming and it's not there yet, but it's coming. Man, that in Calgary now, I'm sure.
I smelled that this morning. Yep.
I know you did. and as you know that's coming. We just knew we have to be ahead of this. And what was really interesting was our relationship with churches. It was one of those pressure points that I felt really a little bit frustrated with for how little there was, but how little room there was for anything else when it came to how we related with churches around us and even beyond our local area. Outside the local area, there was nothing. We had no relationship with any churches because ultimately what it meant to be in relationship with them was that we would send students, we would encourage them to go check out some of the churches. We would do a program. It was a really fun program at the beginning of each fall semester, where we would take students on a road trip, church and chow road trip. We called it. It's a progressive meal. And we'd visit like 8 churches in 8 hours that night. And they'd each give a little pitch about who they were, their culture, and things like that. What students could expect life to be like in the life of that church.
Yeah.
And that was really neat. That was a really neat opportunity. But that was a one-time thing. And what we realized was we were experiencing the law of diminishing returns, where the more we did it, the less interested students were in being a part of it. Because a student, as a freshman who showed up, got plugged into a church. Well, we would need them to be hosts to help us with the freshmen we would take each subsequent year. And so some of them had gone 3 or 4 times to the same event. And each year, those students who were going again were less excited about it and less excited. And you couldn't blame them, because they were just there for this long, grueling event now that they have a church family. So that was probably the best thing that we did in terms of, on the best day, that was really good. Churches supported us. They came and fed us meals, provided a meal on Tuesday nights before our worship gathering. And there were a couple of events that we would do once a semester or once a year that they would provide food for. But that was it. I mean, it really was like they just served us, which was a wonderful, wonderful thing. But it wasn't reaching students, and the relationships weren't really about plugging students in with church after that one event. It was more of just give us your resources in these particular tangible ways. Now the tables have turned, where there was some question, but both in my mind and in the minds of church leaders and students around us, as we started to turn the corner from campus ministry to church planting church on campus. And we were wondering, how do churches fit into this? What does this look like? Now, if we were trying to plant one church, then it would easily be misconstrued in maybe an unhealthy way, but easily misconstrued as college students, you don't need to go to these existing churches anymore. You can just come to us. We'll keep you. Don't worry about it. But I never wanted to start one church. I wanted to start 1,000 churches. And so when we're working towards that, it's more about training church planters than it is about starting a church to just gather some students together. And so I look at every student as a potential church planter, as a potential movement catalyst. And I see something like they're the apple seed that doesn't just provide another apple, doesn't just provide a tree. It doesn't provide just an orchard, but it provides a lifetime of orchards, and so that reproduction quality is in there, but it has to be called out and identified. And so as we've started doing these reproducing, we have a real simple kind of 1-hour training. In fact, we've done a lot of these trainings online in this context. So that's something we do that I want to pass on to as many people as possible. We do it face-to-face. We do it in one-on-one over coffee. We do it, we've done it in a church service of 200 people before. And so those are kind of the varieties of sizes that we've done these basic disciple-making trainings. It is not just teaching people how to be people who share the gospel or disciple makers or obedient to Jesus. All those things are accomplished, but they're then turned into trainers. So all of our students are trainers. And now we've shifted from being the recipient of all these resources to becoming trainers of trainers of trainers. And in the last year, we've at most ever had a relationship actively with 10 to 15 churches. And in the last year, we've now trained probably 18 or 20 different churches and groups. The ones that we've done in person, where we've been on site, we've done those all around our town, in a couple of neighboring counties on either side of us. Done it out a couple of hours west of us in Asheville, a couple hours south in Charlotte, and we're just getting ready to. We've got a couple of people that have been trained that are from across state lines that are taking this stuff on, and then of course we've done online trainings with people in states all across the country and in other countries, and we become this this group of people who are just giving away everything. We're saying, look, whatever we see that's biblical and that is working in our context, we want to give that away to as many people as possible, because we have received freely, so we freely give.
That's really good. Yeah, I know. We often look at the university and see all these ideas start at the university and then they kind of disseminate out into and I mean, actually it was gosh, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever my wife and I, when I left a youth ministry position at a local church in Winston-Salem, that it was actually
Mhm.
we actually wanted to plant a church on or near a college campus, knowing that, man, that's where the ideas are coming from. The
Mhm.
college students and either professors and the academic level, but those ideas are coming from there, but they can be a blessing outside of there. And I'm really, it's really cool to hear that you guys are training other churches because you see a student, you see a freshman coming in, and you see them on that first day, you help them move in, whatever you do to kind of start that relationship, and you see a potential church planter.
Mhm.
Well, think of a local pastor, whether they're a church planter like myself, just getting started, or have been pastoring for 30 years. When someone walks in the back door of that church and they start walking the aisle, or the auditorium, the theater, wherever they're meeting, or the home group, whatever it is, when that person walks in, how often do we say that's going to be a church planter one day? We just don't
Yeah.
think that way, and it's very kind of Chinese underground church of you to
Mhm.
look at every member that way. And what if you actually said it was one of your, and I know it's one of your core values, but what if every person was a potential church planter? What would that look like for your church? And it's really cool to see that you guys are kind of like um, a petri dish of it, so to speak, there on the campus. You're doing it, you're learning, you're figuring it out, but then you're taking what you're learning there and you're taking it out to help bless other churches. And plus, when your students are graduating, they're not going to be sticking around in these kind of dorm churches and small churches there on campus. They're going to be going out in all these other places, and they'll be taking that same mentality to whether they're a dentist and they move to Philadelphia. Whether they
Mhm.
start something themselves or they become part of a church, they're taking that kind of reproducing ideals with them. And I mean, I think that's so key, and I think that's really what I wanted to hear for our students to hear from you is that you guys are going out in a very non-traditional way, but you're having a lot of really neat success in a gospel sense. I mean, you've
Mhm.
transitioned, as you've already discussed, from being just a campus ministry supplementing the church to actually you're helping get new expressions of church started. You're getting new groups started, new things started, and give us. We got about 4 or 5 minutes here left in our time. Do you mind sharing just a few stories of some students or some of these churches that have been started on the campus there at App State, Appalachian State? For those of you who are not in North Carolina, they are the one of the you would probably say the best collegiate football team in the nation. Correct? I mean,
Yeah.
they've done some good stuff the last couple of years. But anyways, beautiful location, beautiful city there in Boone, right there in the mountains of North Carolina. But anyways, share with us just a few stories to help us kind of see, okay, what are some students actually doing? Because I want the students in this classes to hear your ideas and whatever ministry setting they go to help see something like this started for their own church members, the students that they are a youth pastor over, or maybe they are in a collegiate ministry of some sort. So share a few stories with us as we kind of close today.
Yeah, for sure. So there are really there are three little stories that come to mind that I think help speak to just a couple of the aspects of what we're seeing happen here. It all comes back to priesthood. Will we release the priesthood to God's people so that they can actively obey every command Jesus has given them? He says, make disciples. He says, make disciples, baptize them, and teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. Can I look at a student? Can I look at a person in any church and say, you are a priest before God? You can go and do these things. In fact, we tell our students, you're not making disciples until you're baptizing, because Jesus said, make disciples and baptize them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really by baptizing them as you go, right? So we're watching that happen. We've got a guy who's a freshman, just came into school. He's been sharing the gospel a whole lot, starting to lead some people to Christ, which is brand new for us. We hadn't seen a person come to Christ in like 5 years as a direct result that was trackable through our ministry. He's sharing the gospel. He's seen some people come to Christ. Well, two of our girls that are also freshmen, never shared the gospel before in their lives. They lead a girl to Christ here on campus. They share with her. They follow up, do some discovery Bible study with her. Through a handful of weeks later, as they've been going through these stories from the Bible, she decides she wants to turn and follow Jesus. So here we are. We got four freshmen in the story. Our guy, our two girls, this new believer that they've just led to Christ. We train our two girls on how to baptize because they made the disciple, so they baptize the disciple. And they start teaching her to obey. So we train them how to baptize. We take them out with us. We go out to the river nearby because it's just kind of the place that we go. It was mid-fall semester, so the water was still, not cold yet. And and they baptized her. It was really beautiful. Actually, that one happened in a hotel pool, so the water was really warm. They baptize her. Well, she starts sharing the gospel pretty rapidly, or from the time that she comes to faith, is baptized. It's pretty quick turnaround. She's already sharing her faith. It's just her first semester in school, so her life's already been turned upside down. By the end of her first semester, she has helped form our very first generation church on campus. Meaning, first gen church is one that is made up of new believers, and so she helps form our first new first gen church that meets in a dorm or a library room. It kind of depends, but they meet where they meet. And so she helps identify that, helps name the church. And so she's with the same first freshman guy who is sharing his faith, leading people to Christ. He's the one starting to form these new believers into church, and she's included in that. And so they're out sharing the gospel on campus. Our first student, who's an existing believer, and this girl who's a new believer, they lead another guy to Christ while they're out on campus. And then we train her, this new believer girl, on how to baptize. So halfway through her second semester in college, she has come to Christ, been discipled to obey, is sharing her faith, leading people to Christ, baptizing people, and forming church. And we're starting to see that happen. And she's already joining us for these event trainings we've been doing, where we'll go to a church and just train people. It doesn't cost a dime. We just show up and take them through. So here she is already training people and is telling existing believers that she finds, yeah, sharing your faith is not as hard as you would think. I've only been a Christian for like 6 months, and I'm doing it. It's pretty cool. You should do it too.
Yeah, she's talking to people who have been in the church for 20 years and have shared the gospel, half of a time. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So we see that, and it's just a beautiful picture of obedience. Well, just today, that guy and another one of our girls was out sharing the gospel. They're like, well, right now we're leading up to Easter break, and Easter's this Sunday, and so they're like, well, this is going to be the last chance we have to share with people before they go home for break. So they were out. It's a beautiful day on campus sharing the gospel, and talked to this girl. They led her to Christ on the spot, which is the first that has happened. I mean, we shared the gospel a ridiculous amount of times this year, and in our little campus church, and they led her to Christ on the spot. And they asked her, well, when do you want to be baptized? She said, immediately, which is exactly what we want to hear. So they're going to baptize her in a river tomorrow morning, first thing. Wow. And she says, I can't wait to tell everybody. And so she's going to be a part of one of our churches on campus as she is beginning to make disciples and is learning to be a disciple. And finally, we got a guy who he is a senior. He showed up 2 or 3 years ago to our ministry when we were attractional, still doing the big group worship thing. Been a believer most of his life, country guy from the foothills, quiet, really kind, thoughtful sort of guy. And he showed up. I didn't remember him, even though I was there at the time. I didn't remember him coming. It wasn't for him, and I never saw him again. Well, he showed up at the beginning of this school year when we had really kind of turned the corner finally and weren't identifying ourselves negatively. We were identifying ourselves positively. We were saying, quit saying, we're not this, we're not this, we're not this. We started saying, we are this, we are this, we are this. He heard that we're about making disciples and being missionaries, not a ministry, and he was intrigued, jumped in, and has stayed with us. He's helped start his own little church on campus here as a senior, as he's picked these tools up, self-trained with us. Well, this guy is from foothills in the county next to us. Small little community, has been plugged into his little family church for some time. And it's, maybe medium size for a very small country town. And he's been training them with the stuff that we've been training him to do up here. And so he's getting ready to graduate with his bachelor's degree. He's planning to move home, feels God calling him to be bivocational because he wants to take what he's been doing here back to his community, out of his home church. And with the blessing of his pastor already in place, he has a group of about 13 people. It's kind of a catalytic team that are going to be kind of sent and mobilized out of his home church into that community to begin sharing the gospel, making disciples, baptizing people, and starting churches. And that's a guy who's been with us for a year. Jesus had 3 years and he gives us 4. He was here for 3 years and he gives us 4 on campus. If we can't start a movement, then maybe we're not paying enough attention to how he does things. So we're seeing lots of little things sprouting up here,
Yeah.
and those are just the first fruits.
Yeah, you're pretty fresh into this. I mean, I think it was just 2 years ago or so that you were kind of making this shift. Because I remember talking with you, and you were kind of right in the middle of it, of
Mhm.
kind of getting things turned around and started kind of changing things. And so, just in 2 years or so, you've seen this momentum. And I know you've got a really big vision for your campus. And man, we're just excited. As we kind of close today, what's a prayer request that our class, after they watch this lecture, that they can just take a moment to pray for you and the ministry there at Appalachian State and beyond. So, what's something that we can pray for you and the ministry about?
Yes, a small thing that you can pray for. I'll give you a small thing and a big thing. The small thing is pray for this new believer who just decided to repent and believe today, and is excited to tell all the people that she knows. Pray that God will multiply that He will bring more people into the kingdom through her immediate obedience and witness. And then the big thing is, we want to reach the entire campus and saturate it, not just with Bible studies, but with church. And as we do that, we're aiming for 300 churches of 6 that are all led by students. And so that means generations of reproducing churches everywhere. So pray that God would help us saturate this community with the gospel and with reproducing healthy biblical churches.
Definitely. We'll be praying for that for sure. And what's a way that our students could connect with you? I'm always starting to think, when can I get you to Calgary to come and do some training for us up here? So what's the
Yeah,
way,
dude.
how can our students connect with you and ministry there to maybe have your church? Because a lot of our students are from North Carolina, so they're fairly close drive and whatnot. But how could they get in contact if they did want to get some further help or training for their own church?
Yeah, please, please, please contact me if you even want to talk more about it. I am. We give it all away. It's all free, and we'd love to do video conferencing or show up if we can be there presently. The two best ways probably are Twitter and email. You can grab me on Twitter, mention me, or send me a direct message at Mike_Puckett. Or if you want to drop me an email, you can email me at puckett.mike@gmail.com.
Okay.
I'd love, love, love to be able to give away anything we've got and cast some more vision, share with you what we can share.